You were never my first choice, Genevieve. You're just my backup wife. Maxwell's words cut through the silence of our anniversary dinner like a knife. I sat across from him at the restaurant where he'd proposed 3 years ago, watching him drain his third glass of wine while he explained why our marriage was ending. My name is Genevieve. I'm 42 and I've been married to Maxwell for 3 years, together for 5. I own a boutique financial consulting firm specializing in asset protection and forensic accounting. The kind of precise, detail-oriented work that most people find boring but that pays extremely well and teaches you exactly how money moves and where it hides. Maxwell ran his mouth when he drank, and tonight he was explaining his grand plan with the confidence of a man who thought he held all the cards. Rebecca is finally divorced, he continued, referring to his college girlfriend who'd married someone else 15 years ago. She's ready to be with me now. The way it was always supposed to be. He pulled out divorce papers from his jacket pocket with theatrical flair, just like his business presentations. I had my attorney draw these up. I'm being generous with the settlement, considering you'll only have been married 3 years. I looked at the papers without touching them. Maxwell owned 3 successful construction companies and had a net worth of roughly $12 million. His idea of generous was offering me $200,000 and spousal support for 2 years. You should be grateful, actually, he said, signaling the waiter for another drink. I gave you the best years of your 30s. Helped establish your little accounting business. Introduced you to the right people. Hey everyone watching from around the world, if you're enjoying this story of a woman who refused to be treated as second best, smash that like button and subscribe for more daily stories of justice and revenge. Let me know in the comments what country you're watching from and if you've ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better. His little accounting business had grown by 400% since we'd been together, but not because of his introductions. Because of my work ethic and expertise. I'd built relationships with 3 major law firms, 2 investment banks, and a dozen high-net-worth clients who valued my discretion and attention to detail. Don't look so shocked, Maxwell continued. You had to know this wasn't permanent. I mean, you're a smart woman. You understand business decisions. I folded my hands on the table and looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time, I saw him clearly, a 45-year-old man who thought success meant he could treat people like disposable assets. You're absolutely right, I said quietly. I do understand business decisions. I stood up, leaving the divorce papers on the table. Thank you for dinner, Maxwell. And for clarifying exactly where I stand in your grand plan. I walked out of the restaurant and drove home to the house we'd bought together 2 years ago. The house where I'd been handling all the finances, managing our investments, and organizing our tax strategies while he traveled for work and built what he thought was his empire. Maxwell had made one critical error in his calculations. He'd forgotten exactly what kind of work I do for a living. That night, I sat in my home office surrounded by 3 years' worth of financial records, tax returns, business documents, and bank statements. Not just mine, ours. Because Maxwell had been so trusting of his backup wife's financial expertise that he'd given me complete access to everything. Power of attorney for all business decisions when he traveled. Joint access to every account. Co-signatory on all major investments. He'd even made me the beneficiary on several life insurance policies and the successor trustee on his business trust, saying I was better with paperwork than he was. What Maxwell didn't understand about forensic accounting is that it's not just about finding money, it's about understanding how money should be distributed legally and fairly. And after 5 years together and 3 years of marriage, I had some very interesting findings. The deeper I dug into our financial history, the clearer the picture became. Maxwell hadn't just been careless with his trust, he'd been systematically undervaluing my contributions while positioning himself to walk away with everything. First, there was the matter of our house. Maxwell had paid the $300,000 down payment, but I'd been making the $4,200 monthly mortgage payments for 2 years while he reinvested his cash flow into business growth. In our state, that gave me a significant ownership stake he hadn't calculated. My $100,800 in mortgage payments, plus property improvements I'd funded, meant I owned approximately 35% of a house now worth $1.2 million. Second, there was the business growth issue. Maxwell's construction companies had grown by 60% since we'd been together. Not coincidentally, that growth started exactly when I'd begun handling his accounting, tax planning, and financial strategy. I'd restructured his business model, moving him from a sole proprietorship to an LLC structure that saved him $180,000 annually in taxes. I negotiated better supplier contracts that reduced his materials costs by 15%. I'd implemented cost-saving measures and cash flow management systems that had increased his profit margins by 23%. I'd also been the one who identified and secured the contracts for his two biggest projects, a $3.2 million hospital renovation and a $4.8 million shopping center development. Both deals came through my professional network, not his. In business valuation, that's called active contribution to asset appreciation. My contributions had directly increased the value of his companies by approximately $4.5 million. Third, there was the small matter of the offshore account. Maxwell thought he was clever, hiding $2.3 million in a Cayman Islands investment fund that he'd never mentioned during our marriage. He'd been moving money there systematically for 2 years, probably planning this divorce longer than he'd admitted. But here's the thing about being married to a forensic accountant: we notice when numbers don't add up. Maxwell's reported business income versus his lifestyle expenses had never quite matched. I'd assumed he was being conservative with his estimates for tax purposes, but now I understood he'd been systematically moving profits offshore. Unfortunately for Maxwell, I'd been handling his taxes. I knew about every transaction, every business account, every investment he'd made since we'd been together, including the monthly transfers to consulting fees that were actually funding his Cayman account. Hiding assets during divorce proceedings isn't just unethical, it's illegal. And it gives the wrong spouse significant leverage in settlement negotiations. I spent the entire weekend documenting everything: transaction histories, business valuations, contribution analyses, asset appreciation calculations. By Monday morning, I had a 47-page financial analysis that would make any forensic accountant proud. Then I called Natasha Blackthorne, the most ruthless divorce attorney in the state. "Genevieve, I've been wondering when you'd call," Natasha said when I reached her office Tuesday morning. "I heard Maxwell's been telling people around town that he's getting back together with some old college girlfriend. Small towns. Everyone knows everything eventually. He served me papers Friday night. Called me his backup wife. Charming. What do you need from me?" "I need you to help me get what I'm legally entitled to. All of it." I slid my financial analysis across her mahogany desk. Natasha flipped through it, her eyebrows rising with each page. "This is excellent work. Very thorough." She looked up at me with something approaching admiration. "How much does Maxwell know about what you've discovered?" "Nothing. He thinks I'm just a bookkeeper who'll take his generous offer and disappear quietly so he can play house with Rebecca." Natasha smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile. Men like Maxwell always underestimate the women who handle their finances. "It's going to cost him dearly." She leaned back in her leather chair. "Based on this analysis, you're looking at potentially 40 to 50% of all marital assets. Maybe more if we can prove the hidden assets constitute marital waste and financial misconduct." "What does that mean in dollars?" "Conservatively? 4 to 6 million. Possibly more if his businesses are valued higher than your estimates." I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Maxwell's generous offer of $200,000 was less than 2% of what I was actually entitled to. "There's something else," Natasha continued. "If he's been hiding assets, we can petition the court for an emergency freeze on all accounts pending full disclosure. He won't be able to move any more money until this is resolved." "Do it." The next morning, Maxwell called me. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Genevieve, what the hell is this about freezing my accounts? I can't run my businesses if I can't access my operating capital. I wouldn't know anything about that. You'll need to talk to my attorney. Your attorney? That's completely unnecessary. I told you I'm being generous with the settlement. Generous based on what calculation? What do you mean? I mean, how did you determine that $200,000 represents a fair division of marital assets worth approximately $12 million? Long silence. You've been going through my financial records? Our financial records, Maxwell. I've been handling our finances for 3 years, remember? You gave me access to everything because you trusted your backup wife to take care of the boring paperwork. That was for tax purposes and household management, not so you could. So I could what? Understand the true value of our marital estate? Calculate what I contributed to your business growth? Find out about accounts you conveniently forgot to mention in your settlement offer? Another pause, longer this time. What accounts? The Cayman Fund, for instance. Very interesting investment strategy. I'm sure the IRS will find it fascinating during the asset discovery process. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. Look, we should meet. Discuss this reasonably. As adults. You're absolutely right. Your attorney can meet with mine tomorrow at 2 o'clock. I'm sure they'll have a very reasonable discussion about full financial disclosure and fair asset distribution. The first settlement conference was scheduled for the following week. I arrived with Natasha and 3 boxes of meticulously organized financial documentation. Maxwell arrived with Richard Sterling, his business attorney, who'd handled his contracts for years and clearly expected this to be a simple divorce proceeding where his client got to keep most of his money. Richard was in his 60s, old school, probably used to dealing with wives who didn't understand business finances. He'd made the mistake of underestimating me before we even sat down. Gentlemen, Natasha began, thank you for agreeing to this conference. We're hoping we can reach an amicable settlement without the expense and publicity of a court trial. My client is prepared to offer Mrs. Hartwell $300,000 and 3 years of spousal support, Richard announced confidently. We believe this is more than fair considering the short duration of the marriage and the fact that Mr. Hartwell's business success preceded their relationship. Natasha opened her first folder. Let's discuss what fair actually looks like when we examine the complete financial picture. For the next 3 hours, we walked methodically through my financial analysis. The business growth that had occurred during our marriage. The specific contributions I'd made to Maxwell's companies through financial planning, operational improvements, and contract acquisition. Mrs. Hartwell restructured Mr. Hartwell's entire business model, Natasha explained, sliding documents across the conference table. She moved him from a sole proprietorship to an LLC structure, saving him $180,000 annually in taxes. She negotiated supplier contracts that reduced his materials costs by 15%. She implemented cash flow management systems that increased his profit margins by 23%. Richard was taking notes now, his confident demeanor beginning to crack. Furthermore, Natasha continued, Mrs. Hartwell was directly responsible for securing 2 major contracts totaling $8 million in revenue. Both deals came through her professional network. Then came the hidden assets. We've also discovered that Mr. Hartwell has been systematically transferring marital assets to offshore accounts, Natasha said, sliding bank records across the table. Approximately $2.3 million has been moved to a Cayman Islands investment fund over the past 2 years. Maxwell's face went pale. Richard stopped taking notes and stared at his client. These transfers were made without Mrs. Hartwell's knowledge, despite her role in managing the family finances. This constitutes both marital waste and potential financial misconduct. We'll need time to review these documents, Richard said finally, his voice much less confident than it had been at the start of the meeting. Of course, Natasha replied smoothly. We'll also need complete disclosure of all assets, including international accounts, before we can proceed with any settlement discussions. After they left, Natasha turned to me with satisfaction. He's going to try to negotiate now. Probably offer you significantly more money to avoid going to court and having the hidden assets become public record. What do you think he'll offer? Based on his reaction? Probably 2 million. Maybe more if Richard explains how badly this could go for him in court. She was almost right. 3 days later, Richard called with an offer, $1.8 million, the house, and 5 years of spousal support. It's a substantial offer, Natasha told me when we met to discuss it. You could take it and be done with this entire mess. I thought about Maxwell's words at dinner. Backup wife. Like I was some consolation prize he'd settled for until something better came along. What happens if we go to court? With this evidence? You'll probably get 45 to 50% of everything, including his business interests. The hidden assets work strongly in your favor. Judges don't like spouses who try to cheat the system. How much are we talking about? Conservatively? 5 to 6 million. Possibly more if the businesses are valued higher than we estimated, or if the judge decides to penalize him for the hidden assets. Then we go to court. Maxwell called me directly that night, something he hadn't done since the account freeze. Genevieve, please. Let's be reasonable about this. I am being reasonable, Maxwell. I'm asking for what I legally contributed to and what the law says I'm entitled to. You don't understand what this will do to me. If this goes to court, it'll be public record. It could destroy my business relationships. My reputation. You should have thought about that before you called me your backup wife and tried to hide $2.3 million from the divorce proceedings. How did you even? Never mind. Look, what do you really want here? I looked around the house where I'd spent 3 years believing I was building a life with someone who valued me. Where I'd organized his finances and supported his dreams and made myself indispensable to his success, only to find out I was disposable the moment someone else became available. I want everything I'm legally entitled to, Maxwell. Every single dollar. That's vindictive. That's business. You taught me to think like a businesswoman, remember? To understand value propositions and cost-benefit analyses. This is different. No, it's exactly the same. You decided I wasn't worth keeping around, so now you get to pay the full cost of replacing everything I brought to this partnership. The offers kept coming over the next few weeks. $2.5 million. Then $3.2 million. Then $4 million and half the business interests if we could settle privately. I turned them all down. Why? Natasha asked after I rejected the latest offer. You're going to get roughly the same thing in court, and this way you avoid months of stress and legal proceedings. Because Maxwell needs to understand that I was never his backup anything. I was his partner, and partners don't get discarded when better offers come along. The court date was set for 2 months later. During that time, something interesting happened. Rebecca found out about the divorce proceedings and the financial mess Maxwell was facing. Apparently, she'd been expecting to marry a wealthy man who could provide her with the lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to during her own marriage. When she discovered that Maxwell was about to lose half his net worth to his backup wife, she suddenly became much less interested in rekindling their college romance. Maxwell called me 3 weeks before the trial, sounding desperate. Rebecca changed her mind. She doesn't want to deal with all this legal drama. That's unfortunate. You've ruined everything. She was supposed to be my fresh start. Maybe she was looking for a backup husband with money, and now you're not rich enough to be her backup plan. That's cruel. That's honest. Which, based on your track record, might be something new for you. The trial lasted 4 days. Maxwell's attorney tried multiple strategies, arguing that his business success was independent of our marriage, claiming that the offshore assets were legitimate tax planning, suggesting that I was being unreasonably vindictive in my demands. But numbers don't lie, and I had very good numbers. The judge was particularly unimpressed with the hidden Cayman account. Mr. Hartwell, she said during his testimony, you've been married to a forensic accountant for 3 years. Did you really think she wouldn't notice $2.3 million in unexplained income discrepancies? Maxwell's face flushed red. I was planning to disclose that account. When? After the divorce was finalized and the money was safely hidden? The judge awarded me 48% of all marital assets, including Maxwell's business interests, real estate holdings, and investment accounts. The total came to $5.8 million. Plus the house, valued at $1.2 million. Plus spousal support of $8,000 per month for 7 years. Plus, because Maxwell had attempted to hide assets during the proceedings, he was required to pay my legal fees, $47,000, and face potential penalties from the IRS for the offshore account irregularities. After the verdict, Maxwell approached me in the courthouse hallway. He looked like he'd aged 5 years and 4 months. I hope you're satisfied, he said bitterly. You've destroyed everything I worked for. I didn't destroy anything, Maxwell. I just made sure I got credit for helping build it. Rebecca won't have anything to do with me now. Not after this financial disaster. I looked at him with something approaching pity. Then I guess she really was just looking for a wealthy husband, and now you're not wealthy enough for her backup plan either. He stared at me. You've changed. You used to be kind. I'm still kind. But I'm no longer naive enough to mistake kindness for weakness. There. Essay difference. 6 months later, I used my divorce settlement to expand my consulting firm significantly. I hired 3 additional forensic accountants, 2 paralegals, and opened a second office in the state capital. My new specialty became helping women understand their financial rights during divorce proceedings, particularly women whose husbands had underestimated their intelligence or contributions. Business boomed almost immediately. My first major case was a woman whose husband of 18 years had called her his trial wife before leaving her for his 25-year-old assistant. He was offering her $75,000 from an $11 million estate. I don't know anything about our finances, she told me during our initial consultation. Harold always handled everything. Said I didn't need to worry my pretty little head about money matters. That's okay, I said, pulling out a legal pad. I know about finances. And I know how to make sure you get what you've earned. After 6 months of investigation, we discovered Harold had been systematically undervaluing his business, hiding assets in his brother's name, and planning his exit strategy for over 3 years. The final settlement was $4.2 million. My second case was even more satisfying, a doctor's wife whose husband had been telling people she was his practice wife while he figured out what he really wanted. He'd offered her $150,000 from a $15 million estate, assuming she'd be grateful for anything. She walked away with $6.8 million. Word spread quickly through the professional community. I started getting referrals from other divorce attorneys who specialized in high-asset cases but needed someone who could uncover hidden wealth and calculate complex contribution valuations. Within a year, my firm had handled 37 divorce cases with a combined asset recovery of $127 million for undervalued wives. I also started teaching seminars for women about financial literacy and asset protection. My most popular seminar was titled Know Your Worth, Understanding Your Financial Contributions to Marriage. The waiting list was 6 months long. Maxwell remarried 18 months after our divorce was finalized. Not Rebecca, she'd moved to California and married a tech entrepreneur worth considerably more than Maxwell's remaining assets. He married Sandra, his office manager, a sweet 32-year-old who'd been handling his appointment scheduling and probably thought he was very successful. What Sandra didn't know was that Maxwell's construction business had never fully recovered from losing nearly half his assets and having to restructure his debt obligations. He'd had to sell his largest company and lay off 12 employees. But that was between Maxwell and Sandra. I was sure he'd explain his financial situation to her eventually. Or maybe he'd call her his backup wife too when someone better came along. I ran into them at a Chamber of Commerce event 6 months ago. Sandra was sweet, chatty, clearly proud of her successful husband. Maxwell looked uncomfortable the entire time, like he was waiting for me to say something cutting or reveal embarrassing details about our divorce. But I never did. I smiled politely, congratulated them on their marriage, and moved on with my conversation. Because here's what Maxwell never understood: I was never his backup wife. I was his equal partner who happened to be better at finances than he was. The difference was, I knew my worth from the beginning. It just took him calling me his backup to make me prove it in court. Now I help other women figure out their worth too. And surprisingly, it's always more than their husbands think it is. Always. Last month, I got a call from a woman in Atlanta whose husband had been introducing her at social events as his starter wife while openly flirting with younger women. He was a real estate developer worth approximately $20 million, and he was offering her $200,000 and 2 years of spousal support to make this easy on everyone. He keeps telling me I should be grateful, she said. That he's being generous considering I never worked during our marriage. How long were you married? 23 years. I raised 3 children and managed all our social obligations while he built his business. So you handled the household finances? Everything. He travels constantly for work. I've been managing our investments, our properties, our tax planning for over a decade. I smiled, already reaching for a legal pad. Well then, you're going to have a very interesting conversation with him about what generous actually looks like. Some people never learn that calling someone your backup plan is the fastest way to discover you needed them more than they needed you. Maxwell learned that lesson the expensive way. And I built a very successful business helping other women teach the same lesson to their own underestimating husbands. It turns out there's a lot of demand for that particular educational service.